Why are Russians one of the poorest people in Europe despite Russia being one of the richest countries in the world? The transition from communism to capitalism left a lot of wealth to wrong people. The GDP per capita it's not that high. Only Moldovans, Ukrainians and Belarusians have it worse in Europe. It may be a coincidence they aren't part of the EU. The coincidence being that Russia perpetrated a frozen conflict in Moldova and the largest ground war in Ukraine specifically to prevent both from entertaining any possibility of entering associations with unions that aren't Russian-based, and that Belarus is essentially a dictatorship that is often just treated as an extension of the Russian Federation by the Belarusian and Russian governments themselves. Besides this, the Russian government is exceptionally corrupt and there's a massive accumulation wealth at the top that will never trickle down. Also, most of the wealth Russia generates comes from a very limited number of industrial sectors, as you named, mostly focused on natural resources. So even if it looks like the country of Russia is getting a lot of money on paper, it's not spread even remotely evenly between all sectors. And the reality that Russia itself is just not a very wealthy country, and it is spending a ton of resources on funding its war in Ukraine. They were on track to become middle income until they invaded Ukraine in 2014, stalling a decade and a half of growth. Oligarchy and corruption. Overly simplified answer, but basically when the Soviet Union fell, the top government officials at the time, to include one Vladimir Putin, just kinda kept everything. It basically became the oligarchy that people think the US is. I see a couple reasons. One, wrong premise. Is Russia really one of the richest countries? I never thought like it is. Somewhere in the middle field maybe. If you talk about natural resources, then you could ask the same question about every other African country. Two, wealth is concentrated around a handful of people, so most Russians don't benefit from it. 3, Europe is on average quite a bit richer than most countries, so even a poor country in Europe might be better than the world's average. Source of data? Based on GDP per capita, not same as salary, of course, but usually correlates well. At least Kosovo, Macedonia, Albania and Bosnia should be below Russia as well, and Serbia, Turkey and Montenegro should be somewhere in the same range. Corruption. Educate yourself about authoritarianism and tyranny. Iran also has oil. Does it help them, the regular citizens? In those countries, the wealth of individual citizens is at the bottom of their leaders' priorities. I really wonder where this has gone wrong in economic education. It is not the amount you make, it is what it buys that matters. HTTPS. And that is in a capital or Russia. Everywhere else is going to be even cheaper. Corruption in the political and business classes. Why does the richest nation in the world not have healthcare or maternity leave and builds more prisons than schools while claiming to be the well of freedom? John McCain put it best: Russia is a gas station run by the mafia masquerading as a country. The corruption in Russia is staggering. People there don't know any different. They went from corrupt czars to corrupt communists to the current corrupt oligarchy. A lot of overlap in those last two, of course. Same reason the people of the US are getting poorer: rich people who hoard money. Short answer: corruption. You can't simply compare an average dollar value of salaries across countries. You need to dig deeper and see if the average salary will cover a person's living expenses. It is irrelevant what the corresponding dollar value is. Also look at the average salaries for various age brackets, and look at the job sectors separately: farmers vs office workers. For example, does the average salary in the US provide all the necessities of life? Putin and his cronies have ravaged that huge country for all it's worth. Now they want Ukraine's massive resources. It's amazing how popular he is in Russia, all while the citizens are dirt poor. Propaganda works. It's a cartel state that rules by threat against its own people. Externally, it uses terrorism for the same purpose. This means concentrating power and wealth so that no opposition can threaten their autocracy. It's in the interest of Putin to keep his people as serfs and to tell them only he can save them. Believe him, life is easy. Dispute him, life is difficult or short.